on? Mr.
I'm
Sneap?
just finishing Act Up, so just trying to get that finished.
Oh, yeah? Well, welcome to the end of the world. How's it going?
Yeah, it is kind of the end of the world, isn't it?
I thought that if it was going to be the end of the world, it might be a bit more exciting, might be a bit more bang for my buck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. We don't know though, do we?
No, I suppose this could be the start of a decade-long slow stumble through to the end of the world, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what have you been doing? What have I interrupted your hectic schedule to do?
Well, like I say, I'm just finishing Accept at the moment. I did put the finished masters in last night, and then as per usual, I decided to tweak the overheads and bass. Always the last thing. So
Yeah.
I always end up going back and just doing a sort of a little tweak on stuff. So, yeah, I'm just doing that. Just finishing Accept. Then got a week or so off. Then I start Fear Factory, mix that. Then straight onto Exodus after that, mix them.
And how is that working, recording in this sort of era? Are people recording remotely and sending it to you, or people are traveling, or what's happening?
Well, it was. I mean, it's always been like that with the mixing side, you know, especially since the internet's got a bit quicker. We've been able to send the files over to do the mixes anyway. With Accept, we'd done probably 3/4 of the album out in Nashville. I went out there and came back start of March, actually. I mean, I had the right time trying to get back to the UK when this lockdown happened. You know, I had 2 flights cancelled on me, and then ended up having to come back to Atlanta on Virgin rather than British Airways and try and get home. And then obviously I couldn't get back out there to finish the album, so we had to do it. We ended up doing it with Zoom, Audio Mover, and what was the other program we used? Oh, TeamViewer. I was controlling the computer in Nashville with TeamViewer. And then Dropbox. I was dropping the files onto the Dropbox and picking the files up and put them onto my system.
That must have been
worked. It worked pretty well. We were using there's Cubase as well. There's a thing in Cubase that you can do it, but this actually worked better. So yeah, I mean, there's ways around it. There's ways of making it work if you're determined to do it.
Yeah, but it just strikes me that then you're sort of like, how are you going to do the ones that are coming up? Is it going to be remote recording, or people sending you files to mix, or?
They're sending me files. They're recording, you know, Exodus recording themselves, and same with Fear Factory. I mean, their album's done anyway. They're just tracking drums now. So, yeah, I'm just getting the files to mix, really.
So under this kind of lockdown sort of thing, is that mixing is okay, but actually being there to record a band must be pretty difficult without being able to.
Yeah, well, I mean, I should have gone to California to do Exodus, but you know, obviously that wasn't going to happen. So yeah, you just adapt. You know, I've done, but it's meant I've been able to fit Fear Factory in as well. So you know, from a financial point of view, it's all right. It balances out, but yeah, from a creative point of view, you're not able to put your element into it, but that's okay. You know, these guys are experienced enough to know what they're doing. So,
and what do you think about like before this? I was watching the I don't know if you saw this, the Creator live stream from VAC, and then it was almost like a CGI sort of live stream. And I remember last year there was a discussion about this game called Fortnite, and I have never even seen it. I, of course, have no clue about stuff like that. I'm sure you don't either. But and the guy was talking about the biggest gig ever was in the game, and it struck me watching Creator that it was some sort of glimpse into a rather odd sort of heavy metal dystopian future, that there was a CGI'd crowd, CGI'd backdrop, CGI'd flames and all that kind of stuff. And it just sort of got me thinking about I have this sort of, I suppose it's amplified by the lockdown, but this feeling that maybe how we knew things won't quite return to normal. What do you think?
No, it's going to be different, I think. I mean, you know, especially for the larger gigs, I don't see how, especially in America, the way it is out there at the minute, I don't see how, you know, I mean, all the Priest stuff's got put back a year, but I'm sat here thinking, is it really going to be... Is it going to be sorted in a year? I don't think so, the way it's going. I think it's just getting worse at the minute. So I honestly don't know. It's who knows? Who knows? I think the whole thing is, you know, spun everyone out a little bit, and we don't know where it's going. So I don't want to be doing driving gigs and
no,
you know, playing to booths. You know.
Yeah. No, I have this feeling that, like, I was thinking about it during the week, is that, I mean, small bands, like underground bands who are playing to 50 to 100 people could probably work a local gig in a 400, 500 venue. People are telling me that there's 20% capacities and stuff. And very big bands might be able to do residencies, almost like some sort of Vegas style residency. But for all the bands in the middle,
I actually think that's a good idea. It's funny because we I won't say anything, but it's been spoke about, and doing the residency thing, because you can keep everything in place. You know, you've not got the expense of moving it, and you know, you can cut costs basically, which would help some of the bigger bands.
Yeah.
And actually, it's kind of cool because you could do those smaller sort of gigs, you know, the 1,500, 2,000 type thing, and do a bit of a back to the basics type approach to it. And I think that's kind of cool. I think a lot of things are getting lost in these bigger shows these days. So I don't know. I always used to like those, you know, the Sheffield City Hall and Derby Assembly Rooms type gigs when the bands used to come through. It always had a certain vibe. I mean, obviously everyone's right up next to each other, so it wouldn't work with this whole virus thing at the minute.
But wouldn't it be more like, it'd be more like people more or less sitting, kind of like, that's what kind of, I have this vision of sort of people sitting, kind of eating while watching bigger bands in a residence.
It's funny. I went to see Uriah Heep in Japan because it was exactly that. There was tables, and they were on a stage playing in front of these tables, and I mean, I felt quite sorry for the bands, you know, that they're trying the best, but trying to get some vibe back off the crowd is impossible like that, you know.
Yeah, because what I'm sort of worrying, well, I mean, I suppose every musician is worrying about this, is that obviously, I think musicians, and specifically rock and metal, it's just got so many human working parts that trying to move it into this sort of new normal, as people keep talking about, it strikes me that it just doesn't, it's just not possible, you know?
No, and the whole metal world it's a very sort of natural thing, isn't it? It's kind of a you know, it's the vibe of it. It's, you know, it's that passion that's in there, which, you know, people won't be able to express at a gig where they're sat down or isolated. You know, it's always that sort of tribal type gathering, isn't it? You know, for a crowd.
It's kind of like, it's just like rock is a bit too analog somehow, fundamentally, to fit into, you know, the world of, I suppose our world is still stuck in 1976 or 1986, and that touring is still the artery of the music. I mean, it's not uncommon now when, you know, labels talking to bands to ask them, like, does anyone game, because Twitch and all this stuff will be your only source of income anymore, and because once taken live, it's gone, you know?
Yeah, we're old.
Even for young bands, it's still an old process. It's an analog process, and that's sort of like, I would just sort of worry that that's going to, well, can you really see authorities in Germany allowing 40,000 people from all over the world flying to a field and rub off each other for a weekend next summer?
No. It's not going to happen.
No. And then what sort of happens then? I don't know.
I mean, we've just got to sort of play it by ear. I mean, there's a lot of bands trying to make albums for next year now. But again, I mean, do you really want to put an album out if you can't tour it, you know? So
no, I mean, I was being a bit sort of selfish about it and being a bit cranky last week. And somebody was going to me, oh, is it going to make a new primordial album? And I said, well, we'll write songs. But if there's no agency, like no traveling, no gigs, I couldn't see a point in making any more heavy metal personally. Like, because I sort of said, like, what would I do then? Like, an album would come out, and this is what I would do, is speak to different journalists on Zoom. And then, okay, I'm just back to back to, you know, pottering around to the shop and stuff. There's no agency. There's nothing in it for me. And the person I was talking to was kind of like, oh, you're so selfish because, you know, think about all the fans of the band. I said, yeah, I know that. But like, that's just releasing an album and then me speaking on Zoom for a week. And then, okay, you're going to go back to where you were.
It's about timing, really, isn't it? I mean, I think if you've got to wait another year for an album, you know, if we've got to wait another year before we can actually tour, a year's not a long time. You know, I think you're better off hanging on to that material so you can put it to good use, you know, rather than releasing it. Maybe release one or two sort of singles or some sort of taster type thing, or do, you know, it's like Saxon are doing a covers album now. We were going to finish their album at the end of the year, but they're going to do a covers album to tide them over. And I think that's kind of the right approach. Do something just to keep the public interest up and keep your name in the you know, in the public eye. But
what do you think about the sort of the you know, the live streams to no one kind of thing? Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have. I don't really watch it. I mean, I'm not that up on the whole social media thing, to be honest. So I'm kind of it bores me. It bores me. There's no.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit and watch a band, you know, even acoustically or you know, or the odd live thing. It doesn't really do anything for me. I don't get the vibe off it. But I understand why bands are doing it, because they're just trying to keep the things ticking over, and it's the only way they can do it at the minute. So that's not, you know, I'm not putting it down, but it doesn't interest me if I'm totally honest about it.
Yeah, it feels sort of a bit depressing and empty to me. I mean, maybe that's me amplifying or projecting my own lockdown worries and fears onto the endeavors of others, but it does feel a little bit like, oh, they you know, the sort of the rock and roll element of all of this is just, oh, okay, now we're reduced to a band playing in an empty room, you know?
Yeah. I've done that enough times. Don't need to see anyone else doing it.
Oddly enough, and sort of prepping for the kind of today sort of in prepping for the conversation, I was just watching a video of you playing in Braunschweig or something in 1988.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So young heads on everybody, you know?
Yeah, that would have been the Dudley Speed Convoy with Rage and Risk. Yeah, not many people on those dates, you know, talking about empty rooms. No, there's probably about 150, 200 there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was, you know, this first European tour we did.
Rage and Risk.
Yeah.
Curious combination.
Yeah, they were both managed by a guy called Boogie Kopek, which was Drakkar Promotions.
Yeah.
Who also did Creator back in the day. So he put the tour together because he knew Carl at Noise, and they wanted to put a three band package together. So yeah, it was us, and those two bands went out for sort of, I think it was 6 weeks around Europe. So yeah, it was good experience.
You must have been very young then, like 18 or 19, right?
18, yeah.
18.
Yeah.
And allowed out of home to tour Europe for 6 weeks with Risk and.
Well, I actually, yeah. I mean, we had to wait till I was 18 to sign the contract with Noise, and by the time I was 18 in July, and then by September of 1987, we were in Hanover recording the first album. So it all moved really quickly, to be honest. So to think back now, you know, when I was 18, I was spending 6 weeks, or no, probably four or 5 weeks in Germany, recording my first record when I was 18. You know, at the time it didn't seem odd, but now when I look at 18-year-old kids now, again, not putting anyone down, but you know, my brother's kids when they were 18 seemed really young.
Yeah.
I guess I was really young. I remember starving myself. I saved all my PDs. I lived on a slice of pizza and a tub of yogurt every day, and saved all my PDs so I could buy a Kayla Trem for my guitar. I lost about 1.5 stone. I was down to about 10.5 stone by the time I got home.
Yeah, because I was thinking about it as well, because we were talking about it in Primordial, and three of us, I don't think we really knew each other yet. We saw Sabbath in '89 in Dublin. And Yeah, that was it. And it was just really quite influential to us because it was the first band we'd seen who weren't just wearing jeans and t-shirts. I probably told you this, bored you this by telling you in the backstage before sometime. And it was the first time we'd ever seen a band like wearing sort of like black and gauntlets and leather and stuff. And it was just like really profoundly, we went, oh, okay. You don't need to just look like Testament and stuff. Where did all that kind of thing come from, really?
To be honest, it was really Martin and Fraser that were into the whole pagan imagery side of things. I was more into the thrash side of things and more into the playing and the riffs and, you know, gear and the guitars, you know. And I actually, I didn't realize at the time, but looking back now, it was obviously something that connected with people, you know, obviously Martin's lyrics and the whole the vibe, you know. I really just had my head down and I was writing as many riffs as possible, you know. And we didn't really think that much about the songwriting, to be honest. You know, I'd write the riffs and he'd stick his lyrics in and sort of jam them in to fit within the riffs. And we just sort of created something that was, I wouldn't say unique, but something that was a little bit individual and a little bit ahead of its time, because I guess we were so into what was happening at the time with sort of Merciful Fate and Slayer and Exodus and all these bands that were coming up, or were sort of, you know, on the underground, sort of leading the underground. And we were sort of, I wouldn't say ahead of the pack, but we were there at the moment. So what we were doing was connecting with the same crowd as what people that was into that. So yeah, we fell in sort of behind Celtic Frost, sort of, you know, and obviously signed with Noise. So there was like Halloween and Celtic Frost and Creator all on the same label. We sort of, you know, we were sort of the English, quirky English band on the label, you know.
Yeah, well, that's how it struck me, because even the demos to me, kind of like as a black metal kid or black heavy metal kid, whatever you want to call it, the demos almost sounded like black metal. They still sound like really caustic black metal at the time. But the thing that strikes me about it's like how the image was almost perfectly formed and you guys were so young is quite striking. There's usually one band member who isn't playing the game, who doesn't look right, but even in the posters I used to see in the magazines, Sabbat just all looked so perfectly formed. Does that make any sense or sound weird?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was Hell around here that we were really influenced by, and especially very early on, we were sort of not ripping them off, but we were sort of blatantly influenced by them. Just because we looked up to them so much, you know. So their whole idea of being very uniform and having a look sort of struck a chord with us, really. So we always thought that, you know, we could have stage gear and there should be a vibe, you know. And I just think it made for, especially like the packaging and, you know, artwork and things. I always thought it was important to make an impression. And even with the demos, even, you know, they sounded as rough as hell, to be honest, but even with the demos, we made sure we got some sort of decent cover on it and something that's interesting, you know. And it does. It's like, it's making, you know, when you've got a bunch of cassettes thrown at you, you know, you're a record label boss, you're going to pick the one that looks interesting. So it was always common sense, really, of just doing something a little bit different, you know.
But it was so kind of out of step with the kind of English thrash scene, because it's so bizarre to me that, like, you have obviously Maiden, Priest, and all the great heavy metal bands from England, but the thrash thing, I mean, at least to me from the outside looking, I was always more interested in Celtic Frost and Bathory and stuff than Testament and that. But you've got like Onslaught and Slammer. Okay, first Onslaught, fair enough. But by 88, 89, it was all a bit kind of like DAM and all this stuff. And then, but you guys look so completely different and at odds with that whole.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that was really Martin and Fraser. Like I say, they got this sort of this vibe, and obviously Martin writing the lyrics. You know, and being the front man, it was going to give the whole thing that flavour. So, yeah, I can only credit Martin for that, really. Just, you know, having that whole vision, really.
Yeah. And when you were then making those, also like just sort of, I was thinking about all this kind of stuff and going back over my old playing the old records and all that kind of stuff. And I wondered if maybe your sort of like the career you ended up in producing after Sabbath was partly informed by spending so much time in the studios and stuff recording. Maybe the experience of Morning Is Broken or something, or how did that sort of affect your own thinking about producing?
Yeah, I mean, I was always interested in the studio. I mean, I always preferred it actually to going out gigging. I like being creative and putting the sounds together. So, but I remember when we did the first Radio 1 session, and that was the first sort of proper bigger studio we'd been in. And it was kind of just hearing the whole thing come together and sort of another guitar go down and the, you know, it's sounding professional. It was like, oh yeah, we can do this. And when we did the album, you know, I was just fascinated by it. Just you know, the whole recording vibe and miking up and different tones. And I slowly got more and more into it and got my own demo stuff together. I had a little Portal 1 tape machine to start off with, and then I got a reel-to-reel 8-track. And I got a reel-to-reel machine at the old studio, at the old rehearsal room. So I started demoing my own stuff. And it wasn't really the Morning Is Broken album, but it was just, you know, I needed a way of recording my own demos, and I just got more and more into it, bought, you know, more mics and a few other pieces and a little mixer. And I started doing demos for bands at weekends, you know, just to make a bit of money, really, by the time I'd moved out of home. And that led to another thing and led to me working at a bigger studio in Nottingham and then working with Colin Richardson. And, you know, it's just really word of mouth, and you do a good job and one thing leads to another. And it was still in the music business. I mean, I didn't really know what else I could do. And by that time we were early 90s, mid 90s, and the whole thrash thing was dead in the water anyway. You know, I tried doing a few other bits of band stuff as well, and that wasn't working. So really sort of getting into the production side of things was still being creative, and it was still part of the industry that I enjoyed. So it just seemed a logical step, really. And because I'd had so much experience as a musician in the studio, I think it really related to musicians that I worked with, because there was this sort of producer standoff sort of vibe. You know, it was very relaxed. And if I got an idea, I could pick a guitar up and show them and work these out. So it worked well. And a lot of, you know, I got a name for myself, especially locally, as a musician as well. So it helped, you know, it was a step up to doing this side of things, you know.
I mean, but it's funny because, like, you're talking about there in 88 being, or 87 being 18, and then by 1991 the sort of Sabbath is finished, and that's sort of, you're not even 25 yet, you know. I guess it's all happened in about 4 or 5.
Yeah, I mean, it was over by the time I was 21, so yeah, I mean, we weren't actually together that long, you know.
No, that's what's fascinating, because I picked out Morning Is Broken today, and it's a record that I always wanted to love because I loved the cover. But I just, even back then, I just didn't understand. I didn't understand what had happened to the band, really. But also 1991 was kind of, 1991, that even though we didn't realize, because you had Rust in Peace and Seasons in the Abyss and all the big bands were still doing records. But 1991 was kind of the last stand of thrash metal, you know, by 92.
I remember thinking, when the band finally split up, you know, because a lot of the American bands were falling by the wayside as well. And I was thinking, if the American bands can't do it, then we don't stand a chance, because you know, the whole industry the whole vibe was changing. You know, as soon as I saw a Pearl Jam poster in Nottingham, I knew it was over. You know, it wasn't going to be happening anymore. And that, you know, when people say grunge killed it, it really did. People were just desperate for something else, really.
Yeah.
And I think it went more underground, didn't it, really? Because the sort of the death metal thing started coming up, and that was really at the fragments of the thrash thing for me. I wasn't really that switched on to the whole death metal scene in the 90s. I was more focusing on recording and just got out of the scene a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah.
But you can see how it went. That sort of the people that still wanted heavy stuff went towards that side of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I thought, you know, if the American bands can't carry on, I don't see how we can. And the Morning Is Broken album, it was thrown together quickly. I got all the riffs and everything. That was all meant for, you know, the original lineup, we'd had a falling out because Martin wanted to do shorter songs, which again, with hindsight, I agree with. I think I was so involved in writing technical stuff, just to interest myself really.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. I didn't see a point in finding someone similar to Martin because he was off doing Skyclad. So it was kind of what we're going to do with this. And obviously, Richie, who we got in to sing for us, was a totally different ball game. And it was you know, let's try something different. And obviously, you know, it didn't work. There's a few people like it.
I know. I saw their YouTube comment.
Yeah, but.
And it's just a curious sounding record because it's weird because I was wondering I was listening to it today and I was thinking to myself, this is a really strange sounding record, and I had it in my head that maybe somehow it kind of prompted you to kind of go, right, from now on I'm going to record this bloody stuff myself or something, you know.
Oh, sonically you mean strange?
Yeah,
it's weird, isn't it? I mean, we worked with Sean Lynch on that, who did like the Headless Cross album and Tear, and you know, a good engineer, Sean. He did Glen's solo album. He did some of the, I think he did some of the Ripper stuff with Priest as well.
Right, yeah.
But me and him, when we were in the studio, were banging heads a little bit. And I mean, it was a little bit, I mean, actually Dreamweaver as well. I mean, Dreamweaver for me, the mix on that, I think is shocking.
It's very compressed. It's very compressed.
Yeah. And, you know, that was another thing that we didn't get on about, me and Martin. I wanted to use another engineer. He wanted to carry on using Roy. And it, you know, at the time that was a bit of a, what we're going to do here. But yeah, I mean, you know, you learn these things as you go. It's a learning process. I mean, you make a record, we won't do that again, you know?
Yeah. So then by the sort of early to mid 90s, then what were the first things that you were recording on? You obviously went from being assistant engineer to the engineer. And then by sort of 1998, 99, 2000, then you seem to have a sort of, you know, you were just doing so many things, you know?
Yeah, well, I went out to California end of 96 to do Machine Head with Colin. I ended up finishing the album off in LA. And when I was out there, you know, I met obviously Monty from Roadrunner, who I already knew, and I met Borovoy, who was at Century Media at the time. And I started getting work for you know, sort of smaller bands for Roadrunner and Century Media. And it just, you know, kept progressing really. And they were the sort of two labels that had a lot of stuff that was, you know, needed a young engineer with a fresh approach.
Yeah.
So I was getting a lot of work off them. So I was finding myself out in America a lot. Yeah, it just built up that way, really. Just, you know, doing stuff on budget, on schedule, and doing a good job. And people come back to you. And, you know, people going about the Andy Sneap. I was just doing my thing, really, how I felt it should sound, you know.
And it's kind of interesting because you're sort of, I was listening to stuff like some Nevermore and some of this kind of stuff, which I really loved at the time and still love. But I could see how it was sort of dividing the traditional heavy metal, listening public who are maybe not used to such a kind of a modern kind of sound. And it seemed sort of unfair that your name became associated with.
Yeah, I had a bit of an argument with one of the guys at Rock Hard magazine, actually, because he was saying that, you know, he was using my name as sort of in a derogatory term about sort of the modern sound. And I was like, well, hang on a minute, because, you know, you can't say, he was saying everything's sounding the same or what have you, but, you know, you can put Exodus up against, I don't know, you know, Blaze Bayley album or Nevermore, you know, or Testament. They all sound different. I've got my own stamp that I put on things because there's a clarity that I try and get out of it.
Yeah.
But, you know, to sort of tar me with that brush is a little bit unfair, I think. And you're right, you know, that modern sound, sort of, my name kind of became associated with that in a way. Because there was a lot of people then trying to copy what I was doing, and you know, some were doing it well, some weren't doing it not so well, you know. But you know, it's tough because you've just got to sort of stick your head in the sand and keep going with it, really. And I don't I don't listen to those sort of comments anymore because the work keeps coming in. People like what I do, and it's not going to affect me, So,
I mean, this is more like, I'm thinking about this a bit more like, say, 20 years ago, when, if you think about it, you mentioned like Blaze Bayley there or something. All of the traditional metal bands, arguably, I think their records in the 90s sound awful. Man, maybe the people who engineered them in 80, 81 had to listen to people who were 70s engineers going, oh, all this modern stuff in 1981 sounds like this, that, and the other. And I think it was probably something similar that was happening. But like, if a Nevermore record had the awful production of an early 90s Iron Maiden record, it would be completely neutered of its power,
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's some of the stuff that I was listening to. What was I listening to? Some Max Norman stuff the other day. The Y&T albums.
Oof,
he did. Great. He had a really modern approach at the time.
There's some great sounding.
One or two guys out there, did influences. I mean, Michael Wagner as well. What he was doing, some of his stuff in the 80s sounded great.
Your Dokken and Great White and stuff like that.
Yeah, they all had that clarity, which I try and get on stuff now. Obviously, with technology now, and we've taken everything that little bit further and pushed everything a little bit further. And it got to a point, probably, like you say, probably sort of 15, 20 years ago, where we were editing things a little too much, and it was all getting a bit too sterile because Pro Tools had just come out, and we can move that, and now I think we've found a happy balance of the whole thing of how it can work, and still keep a vibe. But yeah, I mean, I think some of those old guys in the 80s were had a good forward-thinking way of doing it. John Cunaberti as well, who did Zentrix and Forbidden. I always think John's stuff's great. Yeah.
I haven't heard that name in a long time. Yeah, I mean, Max Norman did the first, like, Great White sounds huge, and Dokken, Michael Wagner, Under Lock and Key is a huge sounding record. And looking back at it, I don't see that much dissimilarity between some of the kind of the sonic template of some of that stuff from the end of the 90s and that huge sort of mid-80s hard rock sound. I guess what it was disgruntled thrash metal fans and disgruntled underground fans and people who wanted everything to have that sort of 70s very slight guitar sound or something,
Yeah, I mean, everything relates to each other, doesn't it? And now we're not having to we're not on tape and we're not on vinyl, so the sonics have got bigger. The low ends there, the high ends there. When you listen to those old albums, they work. But I think if you apply that now, you'd be getting. It wouldn't work, I mean, I listen to the old Priest records. I've got the old multi-tracks. Yeah. And really, it's just putting the faders up, and it's like there's your mix almost. It's almost, it's so raw. But if people love a song, they think it sounds good. If the amount of people that want a certain sound because they like the song and it relates to them, it resonates with them. So they kind of want a certain sound, but then you can't just take that sound and apply it to something else. So you've got to mix a band for the sound develops themselves. Really, you can't just apply it. You can't take someone else's sound or an older sound, I don't think, and apply it unless you're particularly trying to copy a whole vibe, and then it's why bother,
Yeah, it's kind of struck me as a bit weird sometimes when I talk to younger bands and they talk about sounding like 1978 or 1991, and then you go, yeah, but you're playing like like blast beats and super fast double pedal, and you're down tuned and stuff. You're going, what?
Yeah,
you can't really do that. But a magazine there asked me to name my favorite Martin Birch, sounding record, and I picked Mob Rules. But I was thinking to myself, what would you pick as your favorite one?
Well, Martin Birch. Martin Birch publishing. Well, Mob Rules is good, definitely. But I did listen to Number of the Beast again the other day, and that's a great sounding album. I mean, the snare on that is great. So it's a toss-up between Mob Rules and Number of the Beast for me.
What about Heaven and Hell in relation to Mob Rules? Everybody else is picking Heaven and Hell, and I was thinking to myself,
Mob Rules for me every time. Yeah, Vinny on drums. He just nails it. Yeah, it makes a difference for me.
Mm.
And I prefer just the vibe of it. But I did get Mob Rules before Heaven and Hell, so I think that always, you know, it's where you were at a certain time. You know, you relate back to it, don't you?
Mm.
So yeah, Mob Rules. I mean, I think I've got Mob Rules about 5 times in different formats.
Yeah, yeah.
And I actually nothing to do with Martin Birch, but I actually really like the Born Again album as well, just because it's so different.
It's a weird record. Somebody told me a story actually last week or the other week about Gillan's first gig with Sabbath was apparently in Dublin, to like in a stadium, you know, of 10, 15,000 people. And he wasn't my man for learning the old lyrics. So he'd written them all out on the stage.
The dry ice.
Yeah, and the dry ice gone away and he bent over to move it and split his pants. Yeah. And had to run off like 500 meters to change his pants. So the whole first 2 songs were completely instrumental. Instrumental Iron Man. I don't know. It's a weird sounding record. It's like the snares got this whoosh, whoosh. Oh, it's very strange.
Oh, yeah, it's bizarre, but I kind of like it just because it is so different, you know, so bizarre. Some good songs on it.
Yeah, Disturbing the Priest and Zero the Hero and stuff. Yeah. What's your favorite thing there, or do you have any kind of on a record that you think, I could have hit that one out of the park better, or something happened that was kind of you didn't think it aged so well, or anything that you produced?
There's a few of them. Yeah, I mean, I actually never go back and listen to an album usually when I finished it, because I'm just so burnt on it. And you pull the mix apart. You always pull the mix apart. You know, you're like, why didn't I hear that? Well, why did I do that? You know, there's always something. You know, whether there's too much top on the kick, or you know, the vocals are too loud, or you know, the guitars are weird, and you don't hear it at the time because you just heard it. Yeah, you can't see the wood for the trees. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that really is the art of mixing, in a way, that it is a slice of time of where you're at. And I always try and spend a bit more time now when I'm mixing, just sort of walking away. You know, like this was good to do this today, actually, because, you know, I'll go in with fresh ears again in a minute and just, right, you know, a bit more of this. And you do need to sort of take time, step back. And I always think going into the studio first thing in the morning, listening to what you've done and going with your gut instinct is the right thing to do, because you're fresh ears. You know, I mean, I was 2 o'clock this morning and I was trying to EQ cymbals, you know, no chance.
Yeah. I always think recording is a bit like the power of suggestion, you know, like I don't think it's a good idea to do. I mean, personally, just the albums I've made is like recording to the committee that sit on the couch behind you. I like to do singing to no one and then have everybody come in and go, because like, you know, if you're recording like sort of everybody sitting there going, I don't know about this and that and the other. But the power of suggestion, which is, could the bass be a bit louder? And then you're listening to it and you're thinking about it. The skills to be able to separate as an engineer from the power of suggestion. I don't know if I would have been able to do that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm my own worst critic. And always, like I said to you, at this point in the mix where I'm at now, overheads and bass, it's the 2 things that I think are the hardest things to get right, because they're so dynamic in a mix. You know, cymbals are down to the way the drummer plays a lot of the time. You know, whether he's really powering through them or whether he's just going through the motions. And bass, you know, the low end of a bass can be all over the place if you're not careful. So, and it's 2 things that if you sit both the bass and cymbals back in the mix, it's very easy to mix like that, because you've got a lot of power out the kick and snare, and the guitars are doing their own thing. They're very linear and in their own spot. So yeah, just trying to get that balance and getting those right for me is the fine line of it being finished or not. And usually it gets a little bit overlooked until this point, and then I can't hear that accent there, you know. So it's always something that I come back to at the end of the mix.
And what like that's what I was thinking about. Like, you said to me once, we were playing some gigs with Hell and that, and you just sort of said you just got burnt out with it eventually. Like, what where was the moment where that happened?
With Hell?
No, with engineering, where you just kind of went, I need to go back and play in a band and play guitar again.
I you know, when you're doing it day in, day out, I think anything you're doing becomes a job. Even if you're playing guitar, it'll still, if you're doing the same thing every day, that becomes monotonous as well. So I think sometimes you just need to change things up a little bit and just find another avenue. And the Hell thing was good because it was, it was something that we could build again, really. There was a good vibe behind it, and the guys are good guys.
Yeah.
It was a bit of fun, So yeah, it was never going to be huge, but it was something where we knew we could have a good laugh with it and enjoy it and enjoy playing, which was, it was like being 18 again, and enjoying it. Yeah.
I know that when the band came back in that first album was such a breath of fresh air at the time, and it's the crazy vocals and the stage show and everything was a real big breath of fresh air. But was there a moment where you just felt like most engineers tell me that they reach in just a moment where they just sort of reach total burnout and just the ears just feel super tired and stuff,
Yeah, I've been like that. I've been, I've taken a couple of months off before where I was literally mixing things back to back. Sort of 10, 15 years ago, I was doing so many sort of, bits on the side, and I'll be doing a live thing here for someone and doing a quick mix for some. That's always a good one, isn't it? Oh, can you do a quick mix? Is that? So there's so many bits like that, and I was getting so fried with it. Yeah, you do sometimes have to just go, right, I'm going to take a month off here. I'm going to step back, and you can guarantee that month will disappear before you know it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time that we've been making a record and you've been there pulling 16, 18 or 20-hour days, and the poor engineer has another band coming in at 10 a.m. and you're like finished at 5 or something. And you think it's a weird profession because it's a bit like tattooing or something like this, because in the beginning you have to put in so many hours to prove yourself and put everything in, and then people sort of get used to the fact that, oh well, you put a 16-hour in yesterday, but you've got to do it to kind of make the record sound better to then sell yourself, the process of selling yourself. You must have done some fucking mental back-to-back things then.
Yeah, I have. And I'll tell you the other thing as well, that when you've got when I've got bands in here, you'll be doing, you'll be getting up at like 9 o'clock, 9, 10 o'clock into the studio, working on drums through till 3 in the afternoon, then going on to guitars and working through until, I don't know, 7 o'clock, going out for something to eat, come back, then doing sort of a late shift. But none of these guys who are in here are working all the time, but they think you should be working all the time. Do you know what I mean? Because if you're going, oh, I'm just going to take a couple of hours off now and go out, this is our time. It's like that they're watching the clock more than you are.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why this situation now where I'm mixing on my own, I actually really like it because I can step away. I can have an afternoon off if I want to, and come back to it. And I actually think it benefits more from that than trying to go at it constantly. So
yeah, I always feel like having 2 or 3 hours of concentrated effort as opposed to days where you're kind of not, you're half concentrating on things. Like even just doing singing, I'd rather go in, lash it out, feels right, go and select a few things. But the laborious process, I think, sort of kills a bit of the energy. And I don't think anybody's really can concentrate that long anymore,
No. And you start zoning in on things that just aren't important as well. You'll lose focus of the vibe if you're not careful.
Yeah. And so then we get to I'm sort of kind of moving slowly, kind of chronologically or something like this. Then the sort of Hell, the second album of Hell. I suppose Hell, is it kind of done now, or what's happening?
Yeah, it's done really. It got to a point where we couldn't really get it together to write a third album. Certain people were more, and I'm not putting anyone down here, but had commitments with family, and
sure,
just couldn't get it focused really. And I didn't feel the material we were coming up with felt like hell. I think not having Dave Halliday there, was a huge problem, because we'd obviously used his material on the first two albums and sort of filled in the gaps.
Yeah.
You know, Kev had his way of writing, but it couldn't be all that way. It needed sort of Dave's influence in a way. It needed some of that simpler stuff, but more cleverer stuff in there. And I just thought, you know, if it's not going to be right, what's the point in doing it? The whole reason for doing Hell for me was to get Dave's material out there, and to actually make a bit of money for his family, and just have a bit of fun with it, really, and get his name on the map, you know. And we did that. We did that with the two albums, and it just wasn't really feeling right. So I said, you know, I'd rather it just, you know, I wouldn't say never again, but I just said, you know, let's just stop. We're not doing anything that's of any value. The gig offers are getting less. We're not getting any tours. And it was like, what's the point? Let's not grind it into the ground. We've had a good laugh doing it. We're all still friends. Let's just leave it, you know. And it was me having to do all the organising. I was having to do all the recording. I was going to have to do most of the writing for the third record. And I just wasn't prepared to do that. It's a big thing to do a whole record, especially when you're writing the whole thing and recording it and producing it and babysitting the whole thing and financing it. So I was like, guys, I haven't got time, you know. It's just not when there's not, you know, when I've got band members saying, oh, I can't really go on tour because I've just had a kid, and you know, I'm like, well, what's the point in doing a record then? You know, there's, you know, I didn't see a reason, you know. Yeah.
So it was kind of like a sort of a very cool summer holiday.
Yeah, it was a lad's jolly, basically. Every time we went away, it was like we were on a stag do. So it's good, and we had some really good times, actually. And it was nice because we've all known each other for 20 odd years, longer than that, 30 years. So it was nice just for everyone to reconnect and have a laugh. And for those guys, because they'd never been on big stages or done festivals or anything like that, to let them go out and do some festivals and see a bit of, you know, what the metal scene's really about. It was great. You know, we had such a good time doing it. So, and, you know, they wouldn't have got a chance to do it otherwise. So it was great just to be able to put those songs out and do that. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I'm looking at the thing now, and we're about 3/4 way through, and I haven't mentioned Judas Priest. I suppose it's about time to mention that. If you could tell your 8-year-old self, who I watched today playing in Braunschweig, that you would be playing in Judas Priest, what would he have thought of that?
I mean, I'm still, you know, what the hell is going on? Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it, how things work out? I mean, I just, even when I was doing the album, I knew we'd got, you know, obviously Glenn had got health problems, and I kept saying to the guys, what do you think you're going to do? You know, it was suggested, oh, you know, we're going to have to get someone in it, whether it's not behind the scenes, but get someone in as backup type thing. And I didn't really think anything of it, and I don't know whether they were thinking of me at the time. But, you know, it was, you know, Glenn asked me, it was second to last day of rehearsal in the UK before the American tour. And I was down there, and he just turned around to me and said, you know, do you think you can do it? And I was like, well, yeah, I'll give it a go, you know. I mean, talk about thrown to the lions, you know, I mean, it really was, you know, 3 weeks before the tour started. And I had 3 afternoons rehearsal with them before the first show, which was 6,000 in the US. Just
3 rehearsals.
Yeah, and it was just 3 run-throughs, you know, 3 afternoons. We were meant to have 10 days, but I couldn't get out there because of my visa, and because it was bad weather on the East Coast as well. They had snow all down the East Coast at the time, so flights getting cancelled, and so it was really up to the wire on it. So it was a bit shaky to start off with. I mean, I think we did all right. But it got way more confident as we went on with it, and just you know what it's like. I mean, I know Rich has not been there for 40 odd years, but he's been with the band 10 years, so he knows. You can see how he's developed his place in the band. But you know, stepping on stage on that size of stage with different monitors, different gear, different crew. It's not an easy thing to do. Everyone thinks, Judas Priest, you jam breaking the law in the pub. It's easy, but to step into those shoes in that situation with that pressure, was huge at the time.
Yeah, well, you're stepping into just like also a musical legacy, I suppose, is quite. I've had some trepidation about how, well, not how you would be perceived, but that you would
received. Really, I mean,
because it's sort of.
I think a lot of fans were actually quite confused with the whole situation. It was a bit of a weird reaction, and I think a lot of people even now don't quite understand the situation the way it is with Glenn, because he's still there. He's still part of the band. He's just not physically able to get up there and do a full set, and they needed helping out. So it really was. It's sort of a gentleman's agreement. It was like, Andy, can you help us? Can you? And that's all it is, really.
Well, I saw it at Sweden Rock. I saw Sweden Rock, and I thought it was a great show. Actually, I thought it worked. It was very reverential. And then Glenn came out at the end, and I remember coming away from that. And I was talking with the lads, and Johan from One and Mark was there, and I said, "So what do you think of this?" And he's just like, "Oh, this was really strong. Kind of respectful the way it was done, and then all this footage in the background and everything was cool. But it was very."
I mean, sorry.
No.
We've sort of had to adapt the thing. I can't remember if we did Victim of Changes at Sweden Rock. Well, we've got Glenn. There's the little solo bit at the end, and Glenn's there. And we, in Painkiller, when the Painkiller solo's happening, we've got Glenn up there as well. And I've always. He's a good friend, so I don't want to be up there and tread on his toes. But when they asked me to do it, I was like, well, I can't go up there and jump about like a lunatic, because that's like, who's this guy up there like that? And so it took a while to realise where I needed to be on stage. I was trying to watch Richie out of one eye to see when he was moving forward, to try and keep the stage symmetrical, and where Rob was and where I needed to be. So it really, it took, like I say, it took 10, 15 shows to sort of get comfortable, really, and feel like it was beginning to click a little bit. By the time we went out to America the second time and we did the Deep Purple run, when I watched the footage from that, it looks a lot more natural and a lot more comfortable. But I think, it's going to be like that with anyone. I mean, even, a more seasoned guitar player than me, I think falling into that position, there would have been some nerves there from anyone, really. So I just, it was tough. It was definitely tough, but we got through it. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. The great guys, Rob's brilliant. Actually, there's a lot of little comical bits on stage that the crowd don't get, but we do have a good time up there.
Yeah. And I was kind of like really pleasantly surprised also with some of the setlist choices. Are you allowed to have a hand in pick some of these songs that haven't been played in ages?
Well, we do have a little bit of a discussion sometimes. In the jam room, there's usually me, Richie, and Scott, and Ian will pop in occasionally, and it'll be like, oh, do you know this one? Blah blah blah. And I figured out if I learnt a certain song, Richie knows everything.
Yeah,
he does. I don't know how he does it, but he knows everything. Scott knows most of it. So if I learn it, it means we can do it. So if there's something that I'm kind of like, maybe we should try and get Starbreaker in the set,
That's what I was just going to say, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I've learned this, and we'll have a jam through, and it'll be sounding good, and then Rob will hear it through the wall, and, we should maybe do that tonight. It's like, yeah. My evil plot, yeah. But no, it's good because we can, because we've got, three fans within the band with me, Scott, and Richie.
Yeah.
We can sort of dig a bit deeper on some of this stuff and pull the odd, one out of sort of left field and throw it in there, like delivering the goods or Killing Machine, some of that stuff. It's great,
Yeah.
and fans love it. I mean, obviously you can't do a full set of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No,
to swap the set around a little bit keeps it interesting for us and for the fans as well. So
yeah, there's certainly some surprises when I saw it, and it was just like that kind of look when you look at some music and go, holy fuck, they're playing this, was songs I hadn't seen Priest play in years and years,
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? And it's I mean, I think the when we get round to it, this 50th anniversary tour, whenever it happens, there'll be some good stuff in that set. But yeah. I mean, I figured out the other day, I think I've learned 52 songs now. Yeah, there's a few riffs. And I tell you the weird thing, the hard thing is that a lot of the shapes, sort of the little melody licks are quite similar. Glen's got his style of writing. So when I was having to learn a lot of that in 3 weeks, trying to remember there's a bit in Lightning that was the same as a bit in Ripper, and it was, your fingers, you're going into the wrong song half the time. So yeah, it's tricky. But
so when you found out that you were going to do it, like, who was the first person that you told? And I'm just going to imagine their face when you just kind of went, yeah, I'm going to play the guitar in Judas Priest. Or were you sworn to secrecy for a few days and you had to bite your lip, or what?
No, I told a couple of friends, but I said yes, I'll do it straight away, and then I told my girlfriend I might be away for a little bit now, and that was like,
yeah.
No. So I got it in the neck there. But yeah, it was. I told a few of my friends who were, big Priest fans. Barker, for instance.
Yeah.
Told Nick, I'm close with Nick.
Yeah,
and, I mean, it was like, fucking hell, this is a bit bizarre. But it didn't sink in with me to start off with, and it's still now. It's just a bit of a strange situation because I'm not actually in the band.
Sure.
I'm there to help them out, and I've said I'll help them out. So it is what it is, really. It's just, I'm just, I'm going to be working on the new record with them as well. Not playing, producing. So yeah, it's just it actually suits me the way it is, really, because I can, I've got this side of things. If they need me to do that, I'll hop on board and do that for them. So it's fine. It's fun.
Yeah, and you're can you imagine your teenage self, like I said? Just
no. I mean, even my 50-year-old self was going, holy shit, never mind teenage self. Yeah. I remember getting up on stage, Dr. Joe at Rock City, and playing Grinder with him in the would have been early 90s or late 80s, early 90s. And I actually got on stage, got hold of Glen. I was like, Glen Tipton, it's Glen Tipton. Total fanboy. Dived off stage and nearly killed myself.
Yeah.
I was such a huge Priest fan. They were the band for me. Maiden as well, but Priest were sort of that, how can I say, not more rigid. Yeah, more rigid in a way. It's more metal in a way. Maiden were a bit more, because of Bruce, it was more sort of thinking man's sort of, had a bit more of a progressive side to it, where Priest were straight ahead metal, no messing, weren't they?
Yeah.
And you can hear where Slayer took it from, and a lot of the thrash bands took that sort of Free Will Burning and all those kind of things and took it a step further, didn't they?
Yeah.
So Priest were like a forerunner to thrash for me.
I always thought Maiden was maybe the slightly more cerebral, fantastical, and Priest was the more like the sort of gut grinding rock and roll kind of vibe.
Me, potatoes metal, wasn't it, Priest? Yeah. Especially by the time they got to British Steel, it was like, I think Dave Holland had a lot to do with that. I mean, people don't really rate Dave that highly, but I think he had a very solid. Just the way he played. I mean, it looked awkward the way he played, but when you listen to how solid he was on the records, it actually shaped the sound quite a lot, I think.
I always think about British Steel like as almost like the first ever modern heavy metal record. kind of the way the chords are and the, you know, the gong, 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 that kind of thing is not really in 70s rock. A lot of more 70s metal is the twin harmony and a slightly thinner guitar sound and stuff. It always strikes me as like Grinder, as you say, is like, oh, that's Metal Gods is kind of, this is the first modern sort of heavy metal record.
It was almost pop the way it was written, wasn't it? It was very very arranged and very sort of simple songs in a way, but heavy, and it was a space within the riffs that made it heavy, and it really was. I mean, you can hear them venturing into that territory on Killing Machine a little bit, but by the time they got to, you know, British Steel, they'd really honed that in. Actually, Point of Entry, after that, went a little bit off course, didn't it? It's got some good moments, but it really, you know, it's got some moments that are like,
Yeah, this is it. Don't Go, the one with the reggae intro or something, is a bit like.
Yeah. Is it Turning Circles as well? Is that on there as well?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
So it was a bit, didn't quite hit the mark, but you know, got Solar Angels on there, so that's all right.
Desert Plains,
Desert Plains, yeah. It's heading out on the highway on that album as well.
It is, yeah.
Isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so there's some good stuff on there. But obviously, you know, by the time Screaming came along, they nailed it on that album, didn't they? And they actually did that album in 2 stints. I didn't realise. Tom Allen was telling me they had a 6-month break in the middle of that. So yeah, there's 2 halves to the recording.
Wow.
So you wouldn't know, would you?
No, doesn't sound like it at all.
No.
Well, sir, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Let's see how long has it been going? This isn't going to look good on my YouTube edit, but
yeah.
But so, do you think? How are we all going to try and get back around to the beginning of all of this when talking about the music industry and that kind of thing? I have a feeling like probably next year is going to go, and it's going to be strange to see what's left standing maybe in 2022. But do you think we can all, I don't know, do you think we can all adapt to the new normal? Because I hate this phrase, but how is rock and metal going to sort of come out of this? Because it strikes me that it's kind of an anachronism in a way for this technical modern new world that might be coming in, or am I just being melodramatic by thinking that?
I think you're being melodramatic a little bit. Yeah. I think it'll survive. It'll adapt a little bit, but it'll survive. You know, no one's going anywhere. Well, I think. I think, you know, I think a year will go by quicker than we realise, and things will work out. You know, this whole situation will peter out eventually, but it's going to take time, and I think it will come back, but it's going to be a little bit longer than people anticipating. I don't think. I'm hoping the gigs are going to happen next year. All this stuff that's being rearranged. I mean, it's, you know, everyone's sort of rescheduling. All the festivals have sort of moved everything a year back, haven't they?
Yeah.
Fingers crossed it'll happen, but I don't know. You know, you know, we're in September already, and America's not getting much better at the minute. So you can see the second wave beginning to come a little bit here. So I don't know. We don't know till we get there.
I think there's probably a certain amount of, I suppose, that I was thinking about this, that we've almost sort of had it too good for such a long time. I'm not going to say in the West or something like this, but that 6 months or a year seems like somehow sort of a long time when you're living through it. But in the grand breadth of history or something, having 18 months off isn't really that big a deal. I'm just wondering what is left standing after it, you know?
Yeah. I think, yeah, it'll pop back to normal in its own roundabout way. I mean, it's, you know, we talk about, you know, the way that, you know, the internet's affected the music business, but everyone's adapted, you know, everyone's still here. And this will be another way that, you know, people adapt. You know, there'll be a way of doing shows when it starts coming back, and it will find a way of making it work. So it will be a, you know, a change, but a new normal, as you keep saying. But,
maybe I should maybe I should just become a politician. Actually, you know, I could use my energies into that. You know.
Yeah.
Anyway, sir, it's been a pleasure. We're doing about an hour here, and that's usually what I do about with this stuff. But thanks for taking the time to have a chat and all that kind of stuff.
It's all right. It's good.
This is the new normal, that I'm a content creator now.
Cool. All right, mate.
All right, Chief.
Good stuff.
Thanks a lot, man.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.